at a time when, again, the number one thing that we're every other conversation that I'm having. And that scares me because, as I said, I have two little boys, and I don't want them to grow up in a world that is this chaotic and dangerous, but with America so isolated. You gotta be a friend before you need a friend. And we're gonna have a lot of challenges going forward. These are dangerous times. I can tell you, we can better at getting through that when we're doing it alongside our allies and our partners. And when we're doing it with the American people involved and united behind these decisions. The last thing I'll just say, and we'll open it up, just more on the personal side, but it's an issue I think probably resonates with a lot of you. Some of you might have saw, I announced, I gave a speech about a month or so ago, talking about how my father has been recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's. This has been a really challenging time for my family. You've seen this decline for some time, and it's only all the more tragic by the fact that my dad was actually a scientist and dedicated his life to try to cure Alzheimer's. And now, when we're at the doctor's office doing the memory tests, the diagnosis, the doctor was asking tests about, where was he born, and this and that, and asked the question, what was your job, what was your career? My dad said, I don't know. And you can't help but feel that Alzheimer's wins when my father no longer remembers that he was dedicating his life to trying to cure Alzheimer's. So I feel a real particular mission to really try to make sure we're pushing this forward, that we are engaging and continuing the medical research that this country so badly needs, and we will need. And you can't let Donald Trump and RFK Jr. decimate the National Institutes of Health and decimate our ability to be able to do this type of cutting-edge research, which has saved so many lives. And what I will say, when people ask me, what can you do in Congress, how can you push that? What I will say is that through the appropriations process, we were able to restore almost the entirety of the money that Trump was trying to cut from the NIH. Those are the types of things that there are ways that we've been able to push that, and those are things that we need to continue on. So I wanted to share that with you. But I also just wanted to say, this experience with my family and my father, it has really shown me the challenges that so many face when it comes to caregiving as well. It's not just the fact that we have 200,000 people in New Jersey that have Alzheimer's. We have an estimated 600,000 people in our state that have Alzheimer's and dementia. But they're surrounding that are literally hundreds of thousands and millions of New Jerseyans of Americans around this country that are caregivers, that are trying to make ends meet, that have seen the incredible costs that it takes this now in our state. The average cost of a single room for residential elder care is roughly around $15,000 to $17,000 a month. Who can afford that? I mean, it's crazy how they've broken things up. So I'm working on legislation that will try to open this up for Medicare to be able to earnestly do what it should have been doing all along and be able to help people through these situations. For us to be thinking about other types of reforms to be able to support, but also make sure that these caregivers know that they're not alone and be able to give them some support as well. I had a neighbor a couple years after me, a couple years ago, and I saw a for sale sign outside her door, and I saw her on the street, and I said, well, what's going on? And somebody can put your hands up. And she just started crying and telling me how her husband has dementia and just can't afford care, and she needs to downsize. But she was saying, like, this was theirs forever. This was a home that they raised a family in, and they were planning to grow old in. And she just broke down, just talking about how broken this is, and she's saying, I hope we can try to fix this one day. And I'll just tell you, I didn't understand fully what she was going through at that time. But I did. I just, for as long as I'm in the U.S. Senate, I just promise you, I will stay on top of these issues about healthcare, stay on top of these issues about care in general, the challenges we're facing. And I'm going to do everything I humanly can to try to fix this once and for all, and give us the type of justice that we deserve when it comes to our lives, when it comes to our healthcare, and for us to be able to be here for our loved ones. And I hope that's something that people across the political spectrum want. Because Alzheimer's doesn't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. Caregivers are Democrats, Republicans, it's all of us. So yes, we have issues that we're divided on. But I've also seen the power of trying to mobilize and build a movement around these issues that hit us at our fundamental core as human beings. And I think that hopefully will show us the way of how we pull out of this tailspin we're in this country and get us back on the path where we can hopefully say to our loved ones that we will work and have the kind of support that they need to be able to live lives with dignity and decency. Thank you. We do 2 at a time, just to make sure we go fast.
Senator King, thank you for coming and doing this town hall, first of all. I moved to town for recently, my father is a resident, and I was stunned and frankly infuriated to find that my Congressman Chris Smith, who's been here for 41 years, is too good to do these. It's an absolute act of disrespect for constituents, and I don't know why we do that. So thank you, keep it up. The issue I would like to bring up with you, so many issues, but I would like to bring up with you, is for anyone who's from Social Security, I'm not going to like the next of those cases of paid all my life. If you're alive in 2032, you're going to get a 20% cut in your Social Security, practically on one of any of this, unless Congress does something collectively acts to secure funding for the Social Security hospital, which is exactly what it's all about. At which time payroll taxes are the only source. So there's a lot of options out there. I hope you're thinking about them. Increasing the payroll tax, I think it's going up. This one actually would be great. One thing that would really, really upset me though is if you did a needs test and you said, hey, guy, you managed to save a few nickels because you didn't drive your car, you didn't come here on some vacations, etc. You don't deserve any Social Security that you pay this while you're off. So I hope to hear what you're trying to say about this issue, and someone has to do something about it. So thank you for your time today.
Hi, Senator Kim. I'm Angela. I'm actually a local elected official in Morris County. I'm also the director of the Boys and Girls Club in Patterson, Passaic. And so I wanted to first thank you and your team directly because just recently, as of last week, we found out that we got $500,000 worth of congressional grant spending to use towards trauma-informed wraparound care for our 2,000 young people and their families. So this is, in on-site mental health services, wellness, social emotional learning. So really, when we talk about how much we want to make sure care is brought to the communities that really need it, I really do believe you. So I want to do a big thank you and round of applause. On that, my question is, what kind of federal actions further do you believe are necessary in order to really sustain this type of mental health care that we see, the needs rising all across the country for our young people? How can we keep that care sustained through those communities that really do need it most?
Two of the biggest issues that I hear about, I'll take them in order. You're absolutely right. Our Social Security is not on a sustainable path here, and this is one of those issues that affects everybody, and it's very important that we take on. The solution that I've been supporting of so far, is that like right now, the payroll tax capped at 184,500. That's not fair when others are making so much more. And so it's the idea that someone pay earning $1 million that they're basically capped at the same as someone earning 180,000. So there's a proposal out there that they'll go up to that cap, but then it'll pick up again above 400. And that's something that if we're able to do and make sure that, again, just about fairness here, there's percentages that are out here, then that is something that can put our Social Security on a much better path. I think that this makes sense. I think it's something that, especially after this big giveaway to millionaires through the reconciliation bill last year, that makes sense in terms of how we can do this in a way that will be fair to most other people. So that's the approach. There are other ideas that people have. If you want to get in our here, let me know. But when I've kind of gone through this in more detail, that's something that I think doesn't disadvantage those that are just continuing to try to struggle through in middle class life, making sure we're able to push forward on it. On the issue about just brought up, first of all, I'm glad that funding was able to come through when it comes to your organization and just especially the young people that are struggling. I'll tell you that the top issue that I hear about from educators and parents right now is about concern with mental health for youth. It's something that is really alarming, especially given just what we're seeing when it comes to social media and technology. A lot of concerns. I think our state's moving in the right direction when it comes to some of these restrictions on phones in schools and other things that hopefully can be able to create some more space. But you're right, it has to be a sustained way as well going on top of that. This is one of those issues that infuriates me because when I talk to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, mental health, especially for kids, is literally the top issue that I would say we're hearing kind of bipartisan support for in words, but we're just not seeing the space for this when it comes to legislation. In fact, after the Uvalde shooting down in Texas, we were actually able to pass legislation that was considered to be the largest push for gun violence prevention in decades. It was predominantly a mental health bill. It was predominantly a bill about supporting mental health and safe communities. That is something that this current administration has got all the money to. So all the money that we came up with, this bipartisan approach to be able to do, has been held back by this president. And again, we just heard nothing from leaders on the Republican side about this. And so, I'm continuing to push on this. I'm grateful again that we have a state that has been focused on a lot of these issues, but we need to make sure we're doing better and keeping focused on this and coming up with an actual national strategy to be able to tackle mental health. And again, that's something that I think I can play a particular role on. I think there are not that very many of us in the U.S. Senate that are parents of young kids. Be able to talk about this firsthand, about the challenges and worries that we have for our kids and our grandkids is important. That's the issue that I hope you all continue to raise up as well. It's not always, again, something that makes the front page news, but it's something that I really think everybody is understanding just how bad this is getting, and we have to stay on top of this. Thanks for listening.
Senator Ted, I just want to thank you for coming to Asbury Park. I care about one thing, all of you, the midterm elections. I would argue that our democracy hangs in the balance. And my question is about awareness of the state act. I talk to people from both sides of the aisle, and they talk about, it's not, they're bringing up the whole thing of voter fraud, and I don't think it's a bad thing for someone like you, and obviously, we're still far behind. Marginalized groups and women in this country, who have changed their names. I voted
qualifies that? And I know this is just the first hour of this administration. There's no way that they're going to really let these elections go on without cheating, without, this payback really concerns me. I'm concerned about where DNC, where we spend our money and getting the word out. If I talk to people that don't even know what this act is, and they're saying, like, showing your ID is not a big deal, this is a big way beyond that. And we should put all of our money, all of our energy, we should be everywhere. And most importantly, the old rush we're talking about, we're sitting on that dais. Let's be honest, they control everything right now. They have employees, young employees, female employees. Those employees have children. We need to be talking to them and getting it out. That's where the pressure is, to amaze us and us and everyone out, that like this will not stand. We cannot work for an organization like this. This has got to be some kind of massive effort. Because November scares the hell out of me.
Actually, you stole my first question. I was going to ask you about NIH funding. As a healthcare advocate myself, I used to those NIH funds. How does we, as you judge the residents, how can we help you fully restore those NIH funds and to combat future threats to medical research and science?
Let me take them in reverse on this one. I think the NIH cuts are a reflection of just this broader turn away from science, right? That we're seeing left and right, turn away from education that we're seeing left and right. And that's something that really alarms me in terms of just the trajectory that we're on. First of all, it is so damaging to our global competitiveness, to our economy. When we're thinking about our ability to innovate, that our ability to engage and come up with the next cures, that's so important. But I hear from some of my Republican colleagues, the private sector can handle it. And that's just so fundamentally wrong, because if you talk to any pharmaceutical company or biotech company, they'll be the first to tell you that it's the basic science, basic research that they're able to build off from. That is something that that the government is able to do better than anybody else in terms of being able to mobilize, and that's our taxpayer dollars, right? I don't see us getting a rebate for that basic science, investment that we're making, and that's something that we need to make sure that we're pushing forward. We should be proud of what our scientists have been able to do. People like my father that have been pushing on this and trying to cure these diseases. The reason why my father got into this is my father was born during the Korean War, in Korea during the war, and he was born with polio. And and suffered from that, so that illness to the rest of his life, disabled him. And he saw during his lifetime great scientists nearly eradicate from the world, the plague that disabled him. And he was thinking through, what's the next challenge? Cancer and Alzheimer's became his next big push. And that's what we should be doing. That's forward momentum, right? Instead, now we're at a point where I'm literally hearing witnesses telling me that the polio vaccine is a threat to our health, and then we have R.K. Jr. who literally said on a podcast that he thinks that the polio vaccine is killing more people than it has saved. It's just absolutely atrocious. What is happening. But again, this is one of those issues that I think has strong support across the American people. And we have to make sure that we are pushing back against American people across the political spectrum and understand the importance of medical research. We cannot let the disinformation, and that's what it is, disinformation, not disinformation, purposeful lies to the American people, about this, preying upon our fears. And I think that too, because so often it's preying upon the anxiety of parents, right? We have always kind of spun up about challenges to our kids and issues that could affect them. And people who are weaponizing this. And I just find that it's so scary that the people now weaponizing it are now in positions of such power. that they can try to stop this. So that's something I promise you I'll continue to push forward on. It's so important. Look, I'm right there with you on the midterms. I want to talk about this because this is not a political event. This is, this is me as a senator to all here. So, but I can still talk on it, but I'd like to make sure I focus in on some of the issues before us in Congress. But the midterms are so important, and I say this as someone who literally ran for office the first time when Trump was in the Oval Office. There was a Republican Senate and a Republican House. So literally the reason why I am in politics and engaging is because of a situation similar to what we see now. But I would venture to say, I think many of you would agree, I find this moment to be even more dangerous by far than the experience that we're going through. And as a result, we need to really be able to push on this and mobilize. First and foremost, with the legislation that the gentleman was talking about, the STATE Act, this is something that has become a major push by this administration and Republican leadership in Congress. As mentioned, it is trying to again weaponize fear of voter fraud that is being manufactured and is happening nearly to the level that they are talking about in terms of just the fundamental concern to our democracy. And they are using this as a means to push an agenda that is in line with the broader ecosystem of things that this administration is pushing. You have to think about it as another prong of this offense that they're doing, in line with what they try to do with gerrymandering the states across this country. Literally cheating, literally doing things that are just trying to put things in their advantage. This is another tool in that toolbox. As mentioned, this would be a piece of legislation, for instance, that would require women who changed their names when they got married. Now, if you want to register to vote, you have to bring your head. You have to be able to bring your birth certificate. Something that shows your previous name. Not even a passport now would do, because that doesn't verify your original name. And just the depths to which it goes that is clearly singling out women in that type of way when it comes to that. It would make such that you can't use a driver's license, even a real ID, to be able to validate your ability to be able to register to vote. It would require something like a passport for the rest of us. And look, we're at a time when less than half of Americans in this country have a passport. And so just it's important to be able to just point out, this is not a piece of legislation that is put forward in good faith. This is something that is being weaponized and pushed in a very dangerous way, trying to scare the electorate, trying to make it seem like that is what's the threat to our democracy. And you see that also utilized by Trump when he's talking about federalizing our elections. Again, something in direct opposition to our Constitution. And so, these are the things that we have to be vigilant of. I will say that there is a very extensive national effort on the political side, on the Democratic Party side, more broadly with NGOs and others, that is in action geared towards the midterms and the 2028 election. We saw it in action in the 24 election. We saw it here in New Jersey with the governor's race, a significant number of attorneys and experts that are mobilizing. And so, is there more that we can do? I'm sure that there is, and I'm going to check in with this operation and see what's being pushed for. But I will say that as we have seen special election after special election all across this country over the last 14, 15 months, every single one of them is showing a very strong lean against what this president is doing. Double digits in Texas, especially after those big losses by Republicans, concerted efforts to challenge the results, a concerted effort to be able to discredit the results, and that gives me some hope that this is hopefully not going to manifest in what we saw when it came to the 2020 election. As someone who was there at the Capitol on January 6th, I never want to see our country go down that path again. But I will make sure that I am vigilant on this. It certainly concerns me. But I want you to know that many people are focused on this, and we hope to make sure we can mobilize what's needed to ensure the credibility of your vote. Thank you.
Turn it off. I'm Dr. Charity, living in Atlanta, and I'm part of District 3. And I had to tell you, 2018 was the most exciting campaign year. You have to be working camera, and for your favor that I've been a nurse for 47 years, I see what happens. But there's so many things that I agree with you about, and I just really love that you're a senator from New Jersey. And I have to know, what do you think of Republican Christie?
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you deserve an answer. Thank you. That's great. I will.
Hello? I'm a citizen of Asbury Park, and I have a question about bringing jobs to the community, this community, Asbury Park, especially for our young kids. I have a 15-year-old son who's eager to learn, and it's not really any jobs for any, not just him, but any young kids here in the city. How do you feel about bringing jobs?
Let me take that in order. So first, thank you for coming up from South Jersey. I'm really proud to be the first U.S. Senator from South Jersey, and first Senator from South and really want to make sure that I can shine a light on the challenges that are happening all across our state. As someone who represented the shore before as well, and wanted to lift up communities like Asbury. Look, on your direct question about the Christian vote, it was a complete mistake. I admit that. I was thinking it through as I'm a member of the Homeland Security Committee. So if you look at the others that are Democrats that voted yes, or the others are on the Homeland Committee, what we were thinking about as a group is like, look, we know how dangerous things are going to be when it comes to immigration. Can we try to be some bridge that can have some open communication with her? Especially when I was thinking about issues facing New Jersey. Over 50% of the constituent service cases that my office gets are about the Department of Homeland Security in some way. And I was thinking, maybe there needs to be someone in this state that can get a hold of her. And if there are crises and challenges that we face on immigration, at least one of us has a direct channel to her. And so that's why I didn't vote. The Republicans already had enough votes to get her passed. And I thought if I could at least try to deliver a channel that could maybe help some constituents down the road, that was maybe worth it. It was not. And it was a mistake. It's something that I'm learning from. And I think, just in general, I'm going to continue to do better. And as I said, I'm going to make some stumbles here and there, but I hope you see me as someone who has self-reflection and humility to understand when I did something wrong, and to earnestly fight to be able to try to fix it. And so, that's something that I want to talk about. When it comes to the question about jobs, absolutely. That needs to be at the top of the list of what we're trying to push forward on, especially when we're talking about different parts of New Jersey and making sure the growth we're seeing is everywhere, but also the right kind of growth, right? Whether it's housing or jobs, we're seeing again oftentimes it's happening in such uneven ways, you know, and like when we're seeing what comes next when it comes to artificial intelligence. I mean, the technology is certainly very impressive, but I have a real fear that this is only going to further the wealth inequality in this country, only further the challenges that we're seeing when it comes to jobs. I worry that the jobs that it is likely to, the technology is likely to make obsolete are the jobs that are the backbone of the working class, of entry-level young people trying to get into white-collar jobs and others, and it's going to allow those that are the wealthiest to be able to continue to keep that money and that wealth and continue to grow it. So, you know, those are the things that we need to make sure we're focused on. I am pushing right now on something that is about trying to spur innovation in our state. I gave a speech 2 months ago about something called building the Einstein corridor. I kind of dubbed it this idea of an Einstein corridor. We are a state of Albert Einstein, we are a state of Thomas Edison, we are a state that had led the world in terms of innovation. Yes, we're still strong when it comes to life sciences, but you know, we haven't been pushing in the way that I think we could be to be able to generate that kind of momentum and diversify the innovation everywhere. For instance, this is something that I learned. This is, you know, it might sound a little weird, but I've been learning about this industry called photonics. Probably something that maybe not a lot of you have heard before. I didn't certainly know much about it. This is the type of technology like fiber optic cables, like medical imaging, and so many other things that we see in different applications. New Jersey has the largest and densest concentration of photonics companies in the entire world. This is technology that can be incredibly transformative. You know, something that came out from our leads on companies like Dell Labs, and things that we can continue to push on. That's something that I'm trying to grow and trying to make sure that if you look at it, you know, we're able to get people trained in our community colleges, straight into these businesses. It's something that isn't just for the elites. This is something that can create mobility. And those are the things that I'm trying to push on. But again, always being mindful about how we grow and making sure that this isn't going to further concentrate wealth and opportunity, but this is something that can hopefully expand. So please keep an eye on some of these projects I'm doing. I think Asbury has a great opportunity to be able to really take advantage of this. You know, we see the investments that's happening in the film industry down the road. And Asbury is a place that's drawing a lot of young people and mobilizing, you know, a lot of interest, that type of way of people coming in to this community. Again, we need to do it in the right way, though. That isn't something that's going to hurt those of us that are already here, those of you who are already here. This needs to be something that is being thoughtful as we push towards. I hope that you continue to work probably.
Hi, Senator Jeff O'Leary from Trenton. I appreciate very much for having introduced the question of Iran into the public today because it's quite shocking that official Washington seems to be one of these years staring in the headlights, not acknowledging that the Trump administration is intent on a massive war. At least George Bush had offered to ask Congress for a resolution to authorize his invasion. He even bothered to ask the UN Security Council. Trump has done neither, none of this, and Congress is indifferent. And I hope that perhaps the proposed war power resolution that you are offering will be in some other fashion. But this points to the larger problems. This is being built to us as nuclear non-proliferation. And just 10 days ago, the Trump administration allowed the last set of restrictions on nuclear arsenals of the United States and Russia to expire. And Trump said, if it expires, it expires. And they're evidently looking now to restart nuclear weapons testing that we haven't had since in some 35 years. And Congress put in legislative requirements, mandates that the U.S. continue to observe the New START limits, as long as Russia does, and to prohibit nuclear testing, and are the vehicles that are, quote, must have legislative vehicles in order to force this, I don't want to say force it down Trump's throat, to force him to have to accept.
Hi, my name is Yolanda Harry, and I'm talking about talking about students' affordability and homelessness. I'm a US ex-vet, and I look at a lot of investigating together, and we talk about homeless all the time. And the sad part about it is that we have a lot of vacant buildings, empty buildings. Why don't you give these buildings until we stop buildings and we get some buildings? We get our homeless people to do the job too, they can work with it. And they have a job and they have a place to live. Because the way things are going right now, we all are somewhere looking for something. I speak, because I feel that right now, a lot of my friends are veterans. We get together, we talk about different issues, and we try to do it. I advocate by myself. I do have some friends that we see homeless people, we feed them. We try to give them a place to stay. I can't get enough of that organization, but I do want to see something come out of this where these empty buildings could be buildings that are now furnished for people to have a place to call home.
Hi, Senator Kim. My name is Martha Hickson. I'm a resident of Lake Harbor. But you and I first met in different parts of the state. When I lived in Washington, up in Orange County. My issue then is the same issue now, and that is the First Amendment, which I think is a foundation of just about everything that's being mentioned here tonight. This town hall is a good example of First Amendment in action. And almost 2 years ago to the day, I was very privileged to have you attend my town hall. And that town hall was necessitated by the fact that I was a high school librarian under attack as book banners tried to remove books from my school library, books having to do with people of color and LGBTQ+ individuals. School libraries were really the canary as far as censorship goes. We've seen Penn America tells us that since 2021, more than 23,000 books have been banned in U.S. schools. And it started in schools as an outdoors. It turned into Don't Say Gay in Florida. Now it's Don't Say Plato in Texas universities. Our president is having his visiting institutions and his exhibits to him for his approval. We're seeing journalists being stifled, and even popular entertainers, just look at Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert. It is a great concern. Censorship is not a partisan issue. Large majorities of people on both sides of the political aisle are opposed to it. And so what I'd like to know is, what are you and your peers doing to reach across the aisle to shore up, protect, and preserve the First Amendment rights of every person in this country to speak, read, and think freely?
My name is Senator. Thank you for this opportunity. I will touch base between the social security question and the VHS. There's a union of those two governments. I have personally contributed to social security for over 10 years. I was eligible to get my pension 3 months ago. They denied it to me because I was a whistleblower, whistleblower, and I went out of status. I reached out to the VHS director himself. Alexander Meyer was the predecessor for Christino. And he said, my problem is Congress's problem, because I'm the HOA whistleblower, and there is no provision to accommodate my education status. And at the same time, my contribution to Social Security, which is going to die out in 2033, I'm already feeling that it's dried up. I'm not getting anything. I have reached out to constituent services. They are already acknowledged that there is a legislative gap. So what would you propose to accommodate? Because on the one side, I have done everything legally, and I have been in a limbo, and my wife, suppose something were to happen to me, she would get the pension. I have 2 US citizen doctors too. They would get the pension, but right now my wife is in the same limbo. So I'm requesting the legislative pathway.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Let me just start there. I mean, have you already talked to my team about this? Amanda, okay, let me follow up with Amanda and just get a little bit more detail from what she's been able to do. Just for large, I'm glad you raised this because a huge part of what I do is on the constituent service side. I think so often people think about my job as primarily down in DC, for the hearings and whatnot, but like a huge part of my staff is here in New Jersey, and you can imagine just the sheer volume of people that are struggling on the veteran side of the VA and the challenges there. I'll get to your question in a second. But so let me get a little bit more details about this and some of the you want to pass this on the table. Okay, I'll take the homework. Okay, let me take this from the road. But look, this is important. This is what this job should be about, right? It's being responsive to the needs. And so much what I learned about doing 92 town halls is that so often when someone has a chance to talk to their representative, it's something very tangible, something that they're worried about. Raise what you said as well, just consider veterans that are standing for your service. That is something that really needs to be more than what unfortunately sometimes it is. There's a basic promise that our country makes, which is that if you and others step up to serve our nation and risk your lives to defend us, that we will then take care of you for the rest of your life. And that unfortunately is a promise that is broken time and time again. I often say that there are that the word homeless and the word veteran should never be next to each other. That should just never be a concept that exists in our society. And unfortunately, it is something that we see so prevalent in New Jersey and around the country. And so I've worked very hard on these issues, especially when I was representative of the 3rd District. We had the highest number of veterans of any area in the entire state. We have been pushing forward on a number of different projects trying to get veteran housing built. It's not easy, and a lot of times we have to work with local communities for zoning issues and other types of things that hopefully we can get better at. So, you really raised the point that I'll make sure I follow up with, both in terms of just any issues that you and the veterans that have concerns about directly, and see how we might be able to try to help support and ensure that they have groups of events. But also just more broadly, these are the types of projects that we should be moving forward on. Not all of our housing solutions in the state need to be, luxury condos with a Manhattan skyline, right? And we need to think about how to build these projects. We are pushing forward on legislation in a bipartisan way, trying to get legislation through. We do have a number of provisions there that are focused on veteran housing, so I'll try to re up with my team and see what we can push forward on. But I'll be honest with you, it's not something that's going to be able to take immediate effect. It's also not something that's scaled to the level that is needed. And we are seeing this all the more difficult because this president has also gutted the VA at such a significant and deep level that it is something that we're seeing huge problems and backlogs when it comes to disability pay and other types of things. So I'll make sure that we follow up with these direct jobs. I have a disabled veteran on my team specifically focused on outreach and engagement with veteran communities across New Jersey. It is something that we feel very strongly about. With these last two, maybe I'll take the question back around first. This is, it's people don't necessarily know this part about my career too much, but I actually worked briefly in the Senate as a staffer. I worked as a graduate school fellow in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And I actually worked under a Republican, Senator Lugar from Indiana. And he was incredible. He offered me a job, and I went to him and I said, Senator, with all due transparency, I just want you to know I'm technically a registered Democrat. And he was like, oh my God. Technically, I'm a registered Republican. That was times when, especially on foreign policy, we try to set aside some of the partisan differences. But, it's the Republican Party that led on a lot of the issues of trying to restrict after the Soviet Union, when it came to nuclear weapons, and to now find ourselves in this place where we are seeing basically a new arms race that our country is now firmly engaged in, without being that we're engaged in this with Russia and China. But these conversations I had in Munich, for instance, the unreliability of America and our commitment to NATO is now getting some of our European allies to talk about building up their own nuclear capabilities or extending the deterrence from the UK or France rather than on the United States. There are Middle East countries, there are Asian countries. South Korea, I was there last year, and South Korea is having conversations about starting up a nuclear weapons program because of their concern when it comes to the Trump administration. So this is very concerning when they're gutting these diplomatic tools like New START, which is bipartisan support, that Trump is talking about nuclear weapons testing as if that's something that we need to do. It's absolutely wrong and irresponsible to even mention that. And I'm hopeful that we can, because when I have raised this with a few of my Republican colleagues, and they have raised their own concerns about this trajectory. I think part of the problem, though, is that there is a sense that this new arms race that we're in, especially vis-a-vis China, that it's unstoppable. And that's just such a depressing perspective. I don't want my kids to grow up in a world with even more nuclear weapons than the world that I grew up in. And just the concerns about that at such a deep and fundamental level are real, and just the idea that we're in this space in part because of things that Trump is doing. Trump is trying to push us into a world that is geared and reduced down to this idea of right against right. He's intentionally tearing down multilateralism. He's intentionally pulling us out of treaties, including on climate change and other important issues. And then he's complaining about how China's increasing their weapons and Russia's taking action. Well, look, what has this president done to try to constrain Russia? When we see him continue to push forward. I met with Zelensky in Munich and was talking to him about the importance that we could do in the United States to sanction, for instance, Russia's shadow fleet. Why is it that we're going after Venezuela but not going after Russia, right? Like, these are the things that we need to make sure we're pushing on. So, look, as some of you know, I was a State Department officer. I'm actually the only career State Department officer in the United States Congress. I feel strongly about the importance of looking diplomacy, of ensuring that we don't give up on multilateralism and not letting Trump dominate and create this might against right transactional foreign policy that I think will lead our kids and our grandkids generation down a very dangerous path. So that's important. On this issue that was raised about our First Amendment, about, first of all, thank you to our librarians. You have been at the front lines in ways that you may never have expected to be, but you and others around this country have just been real pillars, and such great models for our kids as well to understand the importance of protecting free speech, but also just respecting books, respecting learning, respecting things that should be so core to our society at a fundamental level. A couple things that I'm pushing on. I'm on the Commerce Committee that has oversight over the SEC. I don't know if you saw it a couple weeks ago, we had the SEC chairman in front front of us, and I really drove him on this issue about the independence of the FCC. And I asked him directly, I said, do you think Donald Trump's boss? And he was just going on and on, oh, you know, he appointed me and this and that. And I said, do you think he's your boss? He said, well, you know, he has the right to be able to fire me. This is a guy that during the hearing, that he said in the hearing that he doesn't think the FCC is an independent agency. When it was literally created to be an independent agency. And while we were doing that hearing, after he said that it's not an independent hearing, and we pointed out that the FCC website literally says it's an independent agency, at that hearing, while we were doing it, the FCC staff, political staff underneath them, deleted independent agency from the FCC website. Can you believe it? That's where we're in. And I reminded this FCC chairman that Donald Trump's not above the American people or his boss. And he does not have the right to be able to take orders from Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, you know, says this, which he often does about going after specific TV stations or others. I asked him, like, do you consider that to be a direct order from your boss? You know, is that something that you have to then take on? It shows why it's important to be able to have independent agencies. Otherwise, what's the point of all of this? You know, like, that's the line between, you know, dictatorship and authoritarianism, right? Is that Donald Trump cannot hold all the levers. You know, and we have to push against this theory that, you know, that Russell Vogt, who again is a very dangerous guy, if you don't know that name, he is the OMB director. You know, he is somebody that's pushing this idea of the unitary executive, this idea that all power can be concentrated just in the president. No, the Constitution also says that the president has to be able to implement the laws of this country, which are dictated by Article 1. So these are the things that I'm going to continue to push through on. I engaged in a bipartisan group that's trying to save our Smithsonian. I'm sad that I didn't have to say that, but our Smithsonian is but I will say we should be proud of New Jersey because Lonnie Buck, she's the head of the Smithsonian, is a New Jersey kid. Celebrated my history month. He was the one that envisioned and created and led the Smithsonian African American History Museum, which is extraordinary. Please, if you are down in DC, you have to see this extraordinary museum. But you know, he is somebody that is under personal threat. They are trying to come after him, discredit him, and discredit so many others at the Smithsonian. And this is dangerous, not just for the Smithsonian, but you see this when it comes to the entirety of what our country is trying to do with the 250th anniversary celebrations right now. The president has completely hijacked those efforts at the federal government level, and it very much looks to be pushing this, as you can imagine, towards a propaganda approach for his kind of history, which we saw an example of as they took down those posters of the history of slavery in Philadelphia. You know, the idea that that's now going to be pushed all over this country. So I just raise that with you because if you don't mind, we'll send you some email follow-up to this town hall because I'm running my own efforts here in New Jersey. You know, trying to push forward and do essay contests and other things for our young kids in schools, get them lift up. I'm looking to do other programs across this state. So very interested in seeing what we can do to work together to make sure that we have programs that can celebrate our history and be able to do so in a way that is inclusive, do so in a way that really lifts up the entirety of what we're trying to do. So that's another thing that I just want to lift out because we just announced that just the other day, and that's something that I'm really grateful for. Look, I'm going to stick around a longer bit of time if you haven't had a chance to be able to ask your question. I want to be mindful that it's probably good that let's give time. I have no idea what the week this is, but I'm sure it's between Sunday and Saturday. But I just say it's been a great honor to be able to stand before you and be able to do this now. I hope it was meaningful for you. not everybody, not every member of Congress does have walls. That number's getting smaller and smaller. And, it already was small before, as mentioned, there are Congressman Chris, he's been on top of it, I've been alive. I have about 92 more town halls than he has. But just overall, it's good knowledge, this is what you deserve. You know, and it really pisses me off that elected officials don't do these types of reforms. I get it. It's challenging. I don't know what's going to be asked. I've had a lot of tough ones before. But that's the point, right? I often say is if I'm not having uncomfortable conversations, if I'm only having comfortable conversations in politics, it means I'm not talking to all the people I need to be talking to. You know, I get it. A lot of people in the state voted for me, a lot of them didn't. A lot of people voted for Kamala, a lot of people voted for Trump. I get it. There are differences of opinions. But I try to move myself into places where I can have those uncomfortable conversations. And I just urge you to as well. As you're engaging with your own network, your neighbors and whatnot, I'm sure you have people in your lives that have different opinions. Let's find ways to try to push ourselves to have some of those conversations. Find a way to do so in a respectful way. You know, there's always this line by Martin Luther King that stands out to me. We all know the I Dream speech. We know the Ending by Heart. There's a line in there that has really been a North Star for me in politics, where he says, let us not try to quench our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and evil. And it's important. So I am putting myself out there tonight. And I'll tell you, it's not just a concern about uncomfortable conversations. We unfortunately have had a lot of security concerns in politics, things that I never wanted to have to consider. But unfortunately we do. So if you don't mind, give just a round of applause to our officers. Conversation that we had, I take it hard. It very much encourages me to do more of these, to continue to make sure that with this toxicity that we have in our society, we cannot let them not convene. We cannot let them divide us physically in this way. We need to continue to have these conversations. We need to continue to do it in person and gather as a community, gather as Americans, and gather as citizens, talking about what comes next for our country. Because God knows we have a lot to talk about. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to take the time to thank Senator Kim for taking the time to being here. And it was really great hearing everybody's questions. Also hard